now joining us on Book TV to preview his upcoming new book, best-selling author Bill Bryson, One Summer America 1927 is the name of the book. Mr. Bryson, why 1927?
Well, I stumbled into it, really. I had always been fascinated by the fact that Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs and Charles Lindbergh flew the Atlantic in the same summer, the summer of 1927. So I had it in mind that that in itself made it an interesting summer, that these two very iconic events were happening in exact parallel. And I just had it in mind that maybe it would be interesting to try and do a dual biography of these two guys with the narrative arc sort of meeting in the summer of 1927. And that was my starting point. But then when I began looking into what else happened in the summer of 1927, I found that those were only just two tiny parts of a much greater whole, that there was all kinds of other stuff happening in that summer. I mean, you had the Great Mississippi Flood that year, which was the biggest natural disaster in American history. You had Al Capone beginning the beginning of the end of Al Capone, the downfall, and indeed of Prohibition, the kind of intimation that Prohibition was coming to an end. You had they started building Mount Rushmore. Calvin Coolidge just astounded the world by announcing that he didn't want to run for president, for re-election as president. He could have won in a landslide, and he decided he didn't want to do it for reasons that are still slightly mystifying. Henry Ford was the summer that he had this mad idea to build an American city in Amazonia. So it was kind of one thing after another. There was lots and lots and lots going on. So the whole nature of the book changed to looking not just at these two iconic figures, Ruth and Lindbergh, who are still central to the story, but looking at all of the stuff that was happening. I'm sorry, Jazz Singer was filmed, the first talking picture was filmed the same summer. So it was just kind of this frenetic amount of activity, a great deal of which changed the world, changed the way we perceive popular entertainment and so on. So it was a consequential summer, but it was also just a really, really interesting and lively one.
Is there any reason all these events happened in the summer of 1927?
They just happened in the summer of 1927. I mean, that's what's kind of interesting about it, is that sometimes these things just happen, and all of these happened then. By and large, there wasn't any particular reason. They weren't there because they had to happen in the summer of 1927. Mostly they just happened then. There were connections. I mean, the reason that Lindbergh was able to fly first to Europe was because of the same storm system that caused the flooding in the Midwest, that caused the Great Mississippi Flood. The same weather system had all of the other aviators pinned down in New York, and it allowed Charles Lindbergh to fly from San Diego to New York and get away ahead of the others. If it hadn't been for the weather system that was causing havoc all over the middle part of the country, probably almost certainly Richard Evelyn Byrd would have got off first, and he would have been the first to cross the ocean. And that would have certainly changed popular history a great deal.
So there was a contest going on at that point.
There was a contest. I didn't realize this before I started doing the book. I'd always just assumed that Charles Lindbergh kind of got it into his head that he would fly the ocean and got a plane and did it. It wasn't anything like as simple as that. There was a prize called the Ortigue Prize, which was named after a French hotelier living in New York, a man named Raymond Ortigue, who just loved aviation. He'd become very excited by aviation during the First World War with all of the dogfights and everything. And he put up a very generous prize, $25,000, which is a lot of money in those days, for the first person or team of people who could fly between New York and Paris in either direction. And so there were lots and lots of teams that were all getting ready to fly and take off that summer. And every single one of them was better prepared and better funded than Charles Lindbergh. Lindbergh was this kid, really just a kid, 25-year-old kid from out of the Midwest, who arrives in New York, Roosevelt Field in New York, with a plane with one engine, is no navigator, no co-pilot, just him and a simple small plane, essentially just a flying gas tank. And everybody thought that it was suicide, and that he would, if he got away first, that he would crash in the water. And of course, he was the one who beat everybody because he had so much. His plane was so much simpler, and there was so much less that had to necessary in order to get it ready to take off.
Now, you open the book, though, talking about a fire in New York City and how people would gather for events.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, and this happened again and again. I don't know what it was. I don't know that anybody could possibly explain what it was, but there was just this impulse by people to gather in huge crowds for almost everything. The fire you referred to is the Sherry Netherland Hotel in New York, just on Fifth Avenue, which was under construction. It was nearly finished. There was a whole lot of wooden scaffolding around the top of it because they were just finishing off the very summit of this building, and somehow it caught fire and all the wooden scaffolding went up in place. And it was, as I say in the book, it was a little bit like a match head, you know, just this great flame at the top of the building. And within a couple of hours, a crowd estimated at 100,000 people had spontaneously turned up. I mean, imagine what it would take to get 100,000 people in New York to gather in one space now. I mean, it would have to be something quite dramatic. Then just a big fire did it. And lots and lots of other things. I mean, the same summer you had Shipwreck Kelly, who was the great flagpole sitter. He went up on a hotel flagpole in Newark, New Jersey, and tens of thousands of people came to watch that. People would turn out for anything. You know, it was just strange. They just, partly I suppose it was much less in the way of popular entertainment and other diversions, but people, if there was something going on, great crowds would turn out for it.
Well, Bill Bryson, on the macro level, when it comes to American politics, Calvin Coolidge not running, Sacco and Vanzetti trial, Al Capone, was there something happening on the macro level as well?
Well, yeah. I mean, the economy was it was a very interesting summer from the point of view of the economy, because the economy was booming, and America was motoring along. I mean, it was overheating, if anything, and this was really a kind of a matter of some concern to some people. Herbert Hoover, in particular, who was the Commerce Secretary at the time, was worried that it was overheating. I mean, it was right to be worried about it because it was overheating, and the Federal Reserve, 4 central bankers from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and then central bankers from Britain, France, and Germany all met in a kind of secret meeting on Long Island, not far from where Lindbergh had taken off a couple of weeks earlier. And they decided very, very mistakenly, for good intentions, but very mistakenly decided to cut the interest rates everywhere, which was what lit the fire that really led to the stock market crash in the following year and then the Great Depression that followed after that.
That's just a quick preview of Bill Bryson's upcoming book, October 2013, One Summer, America, 1927. You're watching Book TV on C-SPAN 2.